Welcome back to another episode of Groundwork. This time I'm going to be changing out these rusty coil mounts because you're not supposed to be able to see the coil out the top of the coil mount. Coil mounts that are rusted out like this are actually quite common on the front of the GQ Patrol. Apart from the fact that vehicles are actually getting older, so rust is more of an issue anyway, the design is actually a bit of a perfect storm to hold sand and moisture, so they do rust out quite commonly. You might find that if you remove that tin plate that sits on the top of the coil on your vehicle, that you might be looking at a situation like that and might need to do some repairs of your own. It's not a big deal. It doesn't extend into the chassis. Like once you change the coil mount out, you pretty much fix the problem. You can actually buy replacement coil hats directly from Nissan, genuine, or from like Patrol parts, somewhere like that. But we chose not to do that for this one because I had a donor chassis that I could just cut one off, and we sort of didn't want to wait for freight and all the rest of it. So the action itself is just getting everything out of the way, cutting it off, cleaning the chassis up, prepping it for rust, and then welding the new one on, the new old one. But yeah, so let's get into that. Removing the battery gives you better access to the steering coupling. Now, to make things easy for myself, I'm actually going to remove the sheet metal through here just so I can actually access that weld at the back. And it doesn't really matter because we're going to have to do that later on to actually lift the shock mounts up, which eventually will happen with this car. Yeah, so it's a new day. The other night, I was about to start chopping into this thing, and I thought, oh, I'll check if the fire extinguisher's good to go. It wasn't, it was discharged. So I had to wait till I could get that sorted because you can't do this job without a fire extinguisher ready to go, because there's brake lines and fuel lines and all stuff that likes to burn, and I really didn't want to have to call Brenny and say, oh, I burnt your car to the ground, because that would be somewhat awkward. But I got a new fire extinguisher now, so. Thing is, when you're doing stuff like this, it's not just about cutting where you want to cut. It's about making sure the slag that's coming out the other side isn't going to be spraying on something that you know might be flammable, or you don't really want to cover in slag. So I've used the plasma cutter to remove all the excess, and now we've got the welded sections. So I can use a 1mm cutting disc now to actually cut in behind that weld, essentially come from the back of it and be able to like chisel it up. But before we do that, what we're going to do is grab our center punch. I'm going to put some reference marks on the chassis so we know that when we put our replacement one on there, we're putting it back in the exact same spot. remove the leather blankets because I want to give this a wipe down with acetone. And if we spilt the acetone on the leather blanket, that would be a bad thing. Spraying the metal with this copper weld through primer ensures that any sections that we can't actually reach with paint are going to be protected from rust. So we've got the replacement coil mount here. I think I mentioned before I actually did cut these off a donor chassis, but you can buy them new as a genuine item from Patrol Apart. I'll drop a link in the description to these on the Patrol Apart website. Line it up on the center punch. Nice and snug. That's what we want. I put this piece of tin back here to protect the fuel lines when we're welding that top one. Right, so I've painted the outside of the chassis, but all that welding we've done has actually burnt the paint off on the inside of the chassis. So to prevent rust from happening, I'm using this Tech Tool 506. It's got a little straw in it, so I can jam it in any holes in the chassis and just flood that whole area in the hope of preventing rust from coming back. All the welding and painting's done, just got to put it back together, the boring stuff. Check out the state of that. That's some fairly maritime grade corrosion right there. It was actually quite shocking to Brendan when he did find that. Bugging him up a little bit as well because he was supposed to come out wheeling with us and he had to cancel because of that, because yeah, that's definitely a structural concern, so it needed to be addressed. That's why I offered to sort it out for him. But job's done now, so I can call that a wrap for this video. If you want to check me out on Instagram, it's at Alterra4x4. In the next video, I'm going to be going into a little bit of depth with some tube and pipe bending. Got a little basic project that I need to do, so it's a good way to show how to do that stuff for people who are interested in it. But thanks for watching, thanks to new subscribers, and I'll see you in the next video.